Please don't trust Mama. Be very careful.
Precious, please don't wear that dress. Precious smiled. Don't worry, Blessing. Mama has changed. I trust her. Mama Sandra smiled as she zipped up the wedding gown. You look beautiful, my daughter. Precious smiled, but the moment Mama Sandra zipped Precious's cloth, she screamed. She grabbed her head and shouted, "Ah!" Then she burst into terrifying laughter. They are coming! Don't let them touch me! Before anyone could stop her, she ripped her wedding gown apart and ran barefoot out of the bridal room. Outside, Mama Sandra collapsed, crying, "My daughter! What is happening to my daughter?" Sandra rushed to hold her. For one brief second, mother and daughter exchanged a tiny smile. Everything was going exactly as they had planned. The entire village believed they were witnessing a bride who had suddenly run mad on her wedding day. They had no idea the evil they unleashed were carefully planned by the two people pretending to love her. What they also didn't know was that the evil they unleashed would one day find its way back to them. Stay with me until the very end, because this emotional story is filled with shocking betrayals, unforgettable twists, and a powerful reminder that destiny may be delayed, but it can never be stolen. And if you enjoy emotional stories filled with unforgettable betrayals, life lessons, and justice that leaves you smiling, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another incredible story. Precious was only 6 years old when her mother died. It was a fever that came without warning during the rainy season and refused to leave. Her father, Chief Adewale, was a good man, but grief has a way of making even good men believe they must hurry to fill an empty house. 1 year later, Chief Adewale remarried. Her name was Bose, a widow with a daughter 2 years older than Precious, named Sandra. He believed he was giving his little girl another mother. Instead, without knowing it, he brought into his home the woman who would spend the next 21 years teaching Precious how to survive where she should have been loved. Mama Sandra never bothered to hide the way she treated Precious. A pot left too long on the fire, a cup placed on the table a little too loudly, or a stitch that was not neat enough was enough to earn Precious a slap before she could even explain herself. "You this useless girl," Mama Sandra would shout until the whole compound could hear. After a while, the neighbors stopped looking surprised. Whenever her voice went up, they simply closed their windows and minded their own business. Sandra, on the other hand, could break a plate and receive nothing more than a sigh. "Be careful next time, my jewel," Mama Sandra would say, already reaching for a broom to sweep the mess herself, while Sandra wandered off without a backward glance. If Mama Sandra ever raised her voice at her own daughter, it was soft, almost apologetic, the kind of scolding that ended in a hug. Sandra would simply roll her eyes, mutter something under her breath, and flop back onto the nearest chair, certain that nothing serious would ever come of it. The beatings for Precious became normal. Sometimes it was a broom, sometimes a belt, sometimes whatever happened to be within reach. The painful part was that the punishment was hardly ever for anything serious. Precious woke before the cock finished crowing, fetched water from the river, cooked the meal, and served everyone in the house before she was permitted to sit. Sandra woke only when the aroma of the food drifted into her room, ate the largest portion without being offered it, and left her plate for Precious to wash. Whenever people praised Precious for being well-mannered or hardworking, she would go to bed hungry that night. It did not matter that she had fetched the water, cooked the food, and served every plate with her own 2 hands. Mama Sandra would simply look at her across the room and say, "There is no food for you tonight." And that was the end of the conversation. Sandra, listening from the doorway, would smile and say, "That's right, Mama. Since they like praising her so much, let them feed her too." When Precious begged to learn tailoring like the other girls in the village, Mama Sandra refused. She convinced Chief Adewale that Precious only wanted an excuse to meet boys, and before Precious could defend herself, her father had already made his decision. Sandra, meanwhile, was enrolled in a tailoring class that same month, one she attended twice before losing interest and quitting altogether. It went on like that, one denial after another. A youth program in the next town that Mama Sandra refused to let Precious attend. A trader who offered her to take her on as an apprentice, an offer that mysteriously never reached her because Sandra intercepted the woman first, smiling sweetly and promising to pass along the message. Small cruelties stacked on small cruelties until they were no longer small at all. Then came the scholarship letter, the one that could have changed everything. Precious did not know that Mama Sandra and Sandra had already found it hidden beneath her mattress. Mother and daughter read it together by candlelight, laughing quietly at how easily hope could be taken from someone who had never been allowed to keep much of anything. They burnt the letter in the fire pot that same night and went back to bed as though nothing at all had happened. Precious only found out because she came back for a forgotten wrapper and heard them laughing. "Did you see her face when she realized it never came?" Sandra said, and her mother laughed harder. "Let her keep hoping. Hope is free." Precious stood frozen outside that door for a long time. This was not the first opportunity they had taken from her, not the second, not even the third, but something about hearing them laugh about it broke something in her that all the slabs and the hungry night had not managed to break. She cried that night, quietly, the way she had learned to cry, and by morning she had already decided. She wrote her father a short letter, simple words, no accusations, just enough to let him know that she had left and that she loved him still, and left it where he would find it on his side of the bed. Then she took the little money she had managed to hide from Mama Sandra and Sandra over the years, folded inside an old wrapper at the bottom of her bag, and walked out of that compound before the cock had even finished crowing. Lagos welcomed her the way it welcomed every stranger, with hardship. She had no family there, no friend waiting for her, and no place to call home. For 3 nights, she slept on the bare ground in front of a small kiosk, using her bag as a pillow and waking whenever a vehicle passed too close. On the 4th morning, the owner of the kiosk found her curled against the shutters and stopped in her tracks. She was an elderly woman called Mama Obi. Many years earlier, she had buried her only child and quietly made herself a promise. If life ever placed another lost child in her path, she would never look away again. "Get up, my daughter," she said gently. "Whatever you are running from, you cannot run on an empty stomach." Without asking a single question, Mama Obi took Precious home. She gave her a warm meal, a bath, clean clothes, and the small spare room that had remained empty for years. It wasn't until the 3rd day that Precious found the courage to tell her everything. When she finished, Mama Obi asked, "What do you want to do with your life?" Precious looked at her with tears in her eyes. "I want to go to school, but first I need to work and save enough money to pay for it." Mama Obi nodded. The following week, she found Precious a job as house help for a kind family not far from her own house. The work was demanding, but the family treated her with respect. Every month, Precious set aside a little from her salary, refusing to spend a single naira she didn't absolutely need. Mama Obi made sure she never worried about food or rent, insisting that every extra kobo should go toward her education. 2 years later, Precious registered for JAMB and gained admission to the University of Lagos. Her savings covered only part of the fees, so Mama Obi quietly paid the rest. Precious met Blessing at school and they became best friends. They became inseparable. For the first time in her life, she had someone she could call a true friend. She told Blessing everything about her childhood, and Blessing made her a promise she never broke. Precious graduated with a degree in business administration. Few months later, she secured a graduate trainee position at a respected manufacturing company in Lagos. Precious met Victor Okonkwo at a corporate networking event she attended. Victor was a manager at another company. He admired Precious's quiet confidence and intelligence, while Precious was drawn to his humility and how easy he was to talk to. What began as a casual conversation led to more meetings, then a genuine friendship, and over the following months, that friendship blossomed into love. Victor proposed on a quiet Friday evening by the water, and Precious said yes before he had even finished asking. Mama Obi cried when she heard the news, holding Precious's face in both hands, the way a mother holds a daughter she has watched grow into herself. But when Victor began talking about traveling to the village to meet her father properly, Precious grew quiet in a way Mama Obi had not seen in years. She tried to suggest they meet somewhere else instead, anywhere but that compound, but Mama Obi would not allow it. She told her gently that a marriage could not begin by hiding where she came from, that Precious was no longer the little girl who had run from that house frightened, and that it was time to go back and show them the woman she had become. So Precious went, though her stomach stayed in knots the entire drive. When Precious arrived home with Victor, Chief Adewale welcomed them with joy. He hugged his daughter warmly, shook Victor's hand, and instantly called Mama Sandra to cook something delicious for them. Mama Sandra was not home when they arrived, but the moment she returned and saw the unfamiliar car parked outside the house, her steps slowed. She walked in to find Precious seated in the sitting room beside a tall, well-dressed young man, and for a brief second, before anyone noticed, something calculating passed behind her eyes. Then she smiled and rushed forward, pulling Precious into an embrace before she had even fully risen from her seat. "My daughter," she said, loud enough for the whole compound to hear. She turned to look at Victor, still holding Precious's hand. "And who is this fine young man?" "This is Victor," Precious said carefully, "the man I want to marry." The moment the words left her mouth, Mama Sandra let out a shout of joy, clapping her hands together and breaking into a little dance right there in the sitting room, singing praises to God for finally bringing her daughter a husband. Chief Adewale, who had no real idea what his wife was truly capable of, beamed with pride, certain he was watching his family unite in front of him. Mama Sandra sent for Sandra at once, and within the hour, both women were seated close to Precious, already raising suggestions for the wedding, clothes, colors, food, guest numbers, talking over each other in their excitement. Mama Sandra served Victor with her own hands, asking after his family and his work as though she had known him for years. Sandra had changed too, or seemed. She hugged Precious tightly and apologized quietly for everything she had done as a child, blaming her mother's influence, asking for forgiveness Precious had never expected to receive. By the time they left, Mama Sandra had already told half the village that her second daughter was home and getting married to a fine young man from Lagos. Sandra began calling every few days after that, offering to help with Aswaebi colors, flowers, and caterers, sounding for the first time in Precious's life like an actual sister. Victor noticed how tense Precious remained through most of the weekend, and once they were back on the road to Lagos, he asked her why she still seemed so guarded when everyone back home had clearly changed. Precious tried to explain what that house really was like for her growing up, but Victor only squeezed her hand and told her she was holding on to a past that no longer existed. Precious said nothing more, though part of her wanted badly to believe he was right. 3 months into planning the wedding, Mama Sandra and Sandra arrived unannounced in Lagos, bags full of fabric, beads, and old family jewelry Mama Sandra insisted Precious wear for luck. She explained that she had been thinking for weeks about the things Precious once asked her opinion on and could not simply sit at home while her daughter's big day approached without her. Before Precious could fully process the visit, Mama Sandra took her hands and apologized again, this time with tears, asking to be forgiven for whatever pain she may have caused her over the years. Precious hesitated only briefly before agreeing to give her a real chance. Mama Sandra smiled and pulled her into another embrace. Over Precious's shoulder, where no one could see it, her eyes stayed open, calm and very still. Mama Sandra left Sandra behind in Lagos to help with the wedding preparations and returned to the village herself, calling almost every day after that. What Precious did not know, what she could not have known, was that Mama Sandra had her own plans. 2 days before the wedding, Precious and Blessing traveled down to the village together. That same night, once the house had gone quiet, Mama Sandra left on foot to the compound of an old woman the village called Mama Ewe. Mama Sandra told Mama Ewe in plain words that she wanted the bride to run mad on her wedding day. "I want the man to marry my daughter instead." Mama Ewe studied her for a long moment. "This kind of work does not reverse itself once it is done," she warned. "Whatever it does to that girl, it will do completely." "I understand," Mama Sandra said without blinking. "Bring me the wedding gown." Mama Sandra returned the following afternoon with the dress folded inside a black nylon bag. Mama Ewe spread it across her lap and began to speak over it, her voice low and steady, her eyes closed. When she finished, she folded the gown back the way she had found it and handed it over. "Make sure she wears the cloth in your presence," Mama Ewe told Mama Sandra. Mama Sandra simply nodded and left before the sun had fully set. Nobody in that house knew where Mama Sandra had gone. Nobody noticed when she took the cloth or returned it, except for Blessing. Blessing had arrived in the village along with Precious and Sandra that same night. Blessing had seen Mama Sandra touching Precious's clothes that evening. "Precious, why was your mother touching your wedding dress like that?" Blessing asked later, once they were alone. "She's probably just admiring it," Precious said, folding a set of gele wrappers. "Remember, she helped pick the fabric herself." "Ask her about it, please. Something about the way she was standing there didn't sit right with me." "Blessing, she has changed. Can we not do this now? Tomorrow is my wedding day, and she has done so much for this wedding. I can't do that to her." Blessing let it go, though she did not sleep easily that night. She dreamt of Precious in her wedding gown, screaming while people watched. She tried once more that morning to say something, but Precious only smiled and reminded her, gently, that her mother had changed, and this was supposed to be the happiest week of her life, and Blessing did not want to be the one to ruin it. The wedding day arrived bright and full of noise, drums from early morning, guests arriving in layers of lace and Ankara, the compound alive with a joy that felt to everyone watching entirely earned. Mama Sandra moved through the bridal room like a woman overseeing her life's greatest achievement. She had opinions about everything: the makeup, the style of gele to tie, and even what time to do everything. She corrected the makeup artist twice. She adjusted the gele herself until it sat exactly the way she wanted it. And when it was time for Precious to wear her gown, she insisted on helping Precious into it with her own 2 hands, fastening each button slowly, smoothing the fabric at her shoulders, standing back at last to admire her. "You look beautiful, my daughter," she said. "Victor won't take his eyes off you." "Thank you, Mama." Precious smiled at her reflection. The moment she pulled the zip closed at her side, something shifted beneath her skin. Quiet at first, barely noticeable, a tightness at the back of her neck, a strange heat crawled slowly up her arms. The heat spread quickly after that, crawling from her arms into her chest, then up along her neck until it settled somewhere behind her eyes, a pressure she had never felt before and could not name. For a moment, Precious thought it was nerves, the ordinary trembling of a bride minutes from her vows, but the feeling did not pass. It thickened. It pulled at something deep inside her skull, and the room around her began to blow at its edges, voices turning distant and strange, as though she were hearing the compound through water. Then, without warning, her body locked rigid. Her hands flew to her head, fingers pressing hard against her temples, as if she could physically hold back whatever was rising inside her. A scream tore out of her, so sudden and so raw that it sent a ripple of alarm through everyone still laughing and dancing in the compound. What followed happened faster than anyone could process. Precious's eyes darted around the room as though she were seeing people crowding in on her that no one else could see, and she began speaking to them, pleading, arguing, swatting at the empty air. Blessing lunged toward her, calling her name, but Precious shoved her away with a strength that did not belong to the woman anyone in that room had known for years. Her hands went to the front of her gown, and before a single person could reach her, she tore it open with both fists, the fabric giving way with a violent, ripping sound that seemed to echo through the entire building. Blessing shouted for people to hold her, but by the time hands reached out, Precious was already moving, barefoot. She held her torn cloth and ran through the compound with a wildness that scattered guests in every direction. What's happening to the bride? She's tearing her dress. Somebody stop her! Precious! Guests rushed after Precious in confusion, shouting her name as she ran barefoot into the street. Before anyone could understand what had just happened, Mama Sandra threw herself to the ground, beating her chest and sobbing loudly enough for the entire compound to hear. Sandra rushed to her at once, dropping to her knees and wrapping both arms around her mother's shaking shoulders. "She ran away. I begged her not to do this," Mama Sandra cried. "I've been begging her since yesterday. If she didn't want to marry Victor, she should have told us. Why disgrace this family on such a day?" Chief Adewaye stood rooted to the spot, his face drained of every trace of color. His lips moved, but no words came. Victor remained where he was, staring toward the road where Precious had vanished. To everyone watching, he looked like a man whose world had collapsed in a single moment. What no one in that compound knew was that this wedding had stopped being Precious's wedding weeks ago. It had begun the day Mama Sandra realized Victor was everything she wanted for her own daughter. She began calling him in secret, presenting herself as a worried mother who only wanted to protect him. "I'm only telling you because I care about both of you," she had said the first time she called. "There are things about Precious she has never told you. I keep praying she'll tell you herself before the wedding." At first, Victor dismissed every word and said he trusted Precious. But Mama Sandra never argued. She simply called back after some days. Each conversation planted another doubt. She said Precious sometimes behaved differently whenever she was under pressure. She begged Victor never to mention their conversations. "Please don't tell her I'm trying to destroy her happiness." Soon, Sandra joined her mother's deception. She began sending Victor fabricated medical reports, photographs, and carefully written messages designed to convince him that Precious secretly battled illness that made her seem mentally sick. But the cursed gown was only half of Mama Sandra's plan. Before leaving Mama Ewe's compound, she had asked for one more thing. "The girl will run," she had said quietly, "but I also need the groom to forget her." Mama Ewe handed her a small wrapped charm. "Mix this into his food before the ceremony. Once the girl runs, his heart will follow another path." That morning, before the guests began arriving, Mama Sandra handed the small wrapped charm to Sandra. Without anyone noticing, Sandra mixed it into Victor's breakfast exactly as Mama Ewe had instructed. Sandra never objected to all her mother's plans because from the moment she met Victor, she had wanted him for herself. Handsome, intelligent, respected, and already a manager in a successful company, he was everything she had dreamed of marrying. So when her mother revealed the plan, Sandra agreed without hesitation. So when Precious wore the cursed gown, lost her mind, and fled screaming through the village, the final piece of Mama Sandra's plan fell perfectly into place. For only a brief second, Victor watched the woman he had promised to marry disappear into the distance. Then the charm settled completely over him. The hesitation vanished from his face. Without another glance toward the road, he turned and walked calmly back into the compound. The village elders gathered inside Chief Adewale's sitting room while the compound buzzed with confusion outside. More than 300 guests waited anxiously under the canopies, whispering among themselves, each person repeating a different version of what they thought had happened. Before anyone else could speak, Mama Sandra broke into fresh tears. "I don't know what came over her," she cried, wiping her face with the edge of her wrapper. "I begged her yesterday to cancel the wedding, but I thought it was only fear. I told her every bride gets nervous. If only I had listened." The room fell silent. I never imagined she would humiliate us like this, she continued between sobs. If she didn't want to marry Victor, why couldn't she tell us before today? Why wait until the whole village gathered? The elders exchanged troubled glances. Everything they had witnessed seemed to support her story. They had seen the bride tear her wedding gown. They had seen her run. No one knew where she had gone. To them, it looked exactly like a frightened bride fleeing her own wedding. Chief Adewale sat motionless. His mind refused to accept what his ears were hearing. Precious! Run away from the man she loved. It made no sense. Yet he had watched his daughter disappear with his own eyes. He wanted to defend her. He wanted to tell everyone they must be mistaken, but confusion robbed him of every word. The silence stretched until Victor slowly rose to his feet. The charm Mama Sandra had placed upon him had already taken possession of his mind. He no longer looked like the heartbroken groom who had watched his fiancé disappear moments earlier. His face was calm, almost unnaturally calm. "If the elders will permit me," he said, his voice steady, "I would like to marry Sandra instead." The room erupted. "What? Today? Her own sister?" One of the elders, Chief Bamidele, stared at him in disbelief. "My son, do you understand what you are saying?" "I do." His answer came without hesitation. Victor looked at Sandra. For the first time since meeting her, she was all he could see. For the first time since meeting her, Sandra was all he could see. Memories of Precious blurred at the edges of his mind, fading like ink washed away by rain, until they no longer stirred anything inside him. He turned to the elders and said, "I want to marry Sandra." Every head slowly turned towards Sandra. She immediately lowered her eyes, pretending to be overwhelmed. "No," she whispered softly. She lowered her head, but beneath her lowered lashes, the corners of her mouth almost betrayed the smile she fought to hide. "I cannot do that to my sister." Mama Sandra wrapped both arms around her. "My daughter," she cried, "you have always thought of this family before yourself. If this is the only way to save us from disgrace, perhaps this is God's will." The elders fell into another round of discussion. The bride price had already been paid. Guests had traveled from distant towns. Food had already been served. If the wedding ended this way, both families would become the talk of every surrounding village for years. After several long minutes, Chief Bamidele finally looked toward Chief Adewale. "You are the father," he said quietly. "Do you object?" Chief Adewale's eyes moved from Victor to Sandra to his wife before drifting back toward the road where Precious had disappeared. His heart told him something was terribly wrong. His mind could not understand what it was. Exhaustion settled over him like a heavy blanket. At last, he slowly lowered his head. Mama Sandra immediately accepted his silence as consent. So did the elders. Within the hour, Sandra emerged wearing the second outfit Precious had planned for the reception, a breathtaking gold lace gown covered in delicate beads that shimmered each time she moved. The musicians, uncertain at first, began playing again. One by one, the guests returned to their seats, convincing themselves they had simply witnessed a bride who had changed her mind at the worst moment. By evening, Victor and Sandra were married, and the compound, still shaken, told itself that a tragedy had occurred, nothing more. Nobody questioned why Mama Sandra had been so certain Precious wanted to run away. Nobody asked why she alone seemed prepared for the disaster. In the confusion, everyone accepted the story they had been given. They simply assumed Precious had done what she had done years earlier, run away from home. 3 days after the wedding, a trader returning from the next village claimed he had seen a young woman wandering barefoot along the roadside, laughing, crying, and talking to people who were not there. Before evening, others said they had seen her too. Before the week was over, the rumor had reached every compound in the village. Precious had not run away because she no longer wanted to marry Victor. She had run mad on her wedding day. And while the village buried itself in rumors, only one person refused to believe Precious's story ended that day. Blessing began to search for her. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. What do you think happens next? Will Precious ever recover? Will Victor and Sandra truly find happiness after what they have done? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Exactly 1 week after the wedding, after searching from one village to another, Blessing and Mama Obi finally found Precious wandering aimlessly in a village miles away from home. Without wasting another moment, they brought her back to Lagos. Mama Obi opened her home to Precious once again, just as she had done years earlier when Precious first arrived in Lagos. Together, she and Blessing cared for her every single day. They bathed her, fed her, treated the wounds on her feet, prayed with her morning and night, and never left her side whenever she wandered away or woke screaming in the middle of the night. Back in the village, news of Precious spread from one compound to another. Every day, Mama Sandra invented new lies to protect herself. Some people called it bad luck. Others said it was God's punishment. A few even claimed Precious was simply reaping what she had sown. But Blessing and Mama Obi refused to listen. They never left her side, never stopped praying, and never believed that God could restore her. Days turned into months. Then exactly 4 months after the wedding, an elderly woman told them about a humble pastor on the outskirts of Lagos who prayed for the sick without asking for money or promising instant miracles. From that day on, they took Precious to him regularly. There was no sudden miracle. Week after week, however, little changes began to appear. First, she started recognizing familiar faces. Then she remembered familiar places. Months later, she remembered her own name. Then, one quiet evening after a prayer session, exactly 8 months after the wedding, Precious looked at Blessing for a long moment before softly whispering, "Blessing." Blessing burst into tears and pulled her into a tight embrace. For the first time since the wedding day, Precious was finally herself again. With trembling voices, Blessing and Mama Obi gently told her everything that had happened while she was gone. While Precious slowly rebuilt her life in Lagos, life appeared perfect for Sandra. She moved into a beautiful house with Victor. She drove expensive cars. She wore the expensive jewelry she had once admired only through shop windows. To everyone around her, she seemed to be living the life she had always dreamed of. Mama Sandra couldn't be happier. Every time she visited, she looked around the house with pride, convinced that everything she had done had finally paid off. But behind the walls of that beautiful home, peace never came. Not long after the wedding, Sandra discovered she was pregnant. Mama Sandra danced around the house, thanking God that she would soon become a grandmother. Then, without warning, Sandra lost the baby. The loss devastated her, but the doctors assured her that miscarriages sometimes happened and encouraged her not to lose hope. A few weeks later, she became pregnant again. This time, she and Victor were even more careful. Yet, just as they began planning for the baby's arrival, she suffered another miscarriage. After a series of medical examinations, the doctor looked at her with sympathy. "Your womb has suffered significant damage. Carrying a pregnancy to full term may be very difficult." Sandra walked out of the hospital in tears. Mama Sandra tried to comfort her, reminding her that medicine was not the final authority. Neither of them realized that the evil Mama Ewe had given months earlier had already begun to unfold. The evil they had unleashed on Precious had started finding its way back home. Something changed exactly 2 days after Precious regained her memory. Late that night, Victor suddenly woke up gasping for breath. It felt as though an invisible veil had been lifted from his mind. Then the memories rushed back. Precious's laughter, their engagement, the wedding day, her terrified scream, the torn wedding gown. "Precious!" he shouted. The name escaped his lips before he realized it. Beside him, Sandra sat up in confusion. "Why are you calling Precious's name?" Victor slowly turned toward her. For the first time since the wedding, he truly saw her, not as his wife, but as Precious's stepsister. His eyes swept across the bedroom, the wedding photographs, their clothes, the bed they shared. Horror washed over him. What did you do to me?" he whispered. Sandra's face turned pale. Before she could answer, Victor had already slapped her. The sound echoed through the room. She stumbled backward, clutching her cheek. "Victor, please, let me explain. I don't want to hear another word." Within minutes, he threw Sandra out of the house. For the first time since the wedding, Victor was finally himself again. The very next morning, Victor went straight to Chief Adewale's house and confessed everything. He told him about Mama Sandra's phone calls, the lies she had planted against Precious, the strange charm that had clouded his mind, and how he could no longer remember why he had suddenly wanted to marry Sandra. Chief Adewale sat in complete silence as the truth unfolded before him. Every question he had carried for months finally had an answer. Before they could even decide what to do next, loud screams echoed from outside. People came running from every direction. Mama Sandra was running barefoot through the same streets where Precious had once wandered on her wedding day. She tore her wrapper with both hands, laughed uncontrollably one moment, cried the next, and spoke to people nobody else could see. As villagers watched in stunned silence, she began confessing everything. She admitted taking Precious's wedding gown to Mama Ewe. She admitted wanting Victor to marry Sandra. She admitted lying to the elders and making everyone believe Precious deliberately abandoned her wedding. She admitted every wicked thing she had done over the years. Nobody questioned her. Nobody interrupted her. The entire village stood frozen as the truth they had been searching for finally revealed itself. Every evil eventually returns to the one who sends it. The very madness Mama Sandra had wished upon Precious had found its way back to her. By evening, the entire village knew the truth. The same mouths that had mocked Precious now spoke about her with pity. Those who had called her cursed realized she had been the victim all along. Mama Sandra remained trapped in the same madness she had planned for Precious, while Sandra's marriage collapsed completely after Victor refused to live with her any longer. Chief Adewale traveled to Lagos immediately after learning the truth. The moment he saw Precious, he broke down in tears. He apologized for failing to protect her, for believing silence instead of asking questions, and for allowing another woman to destroy his own daughter while he stood by helplessly. Precious forgave him, and although their relationship could never erase the past, father and daughter slowly rebuilt the bond they had lost. Precious's own healing did not happen overnight either. Even after regaining her memory, she struggled with panic attacks, nightmares, and painful memories of her wedding day. Blessing and Mama Obi remained beside her through every stage of that journey. They encouraged her to attend professional counseling, reminded her that healing was a process, and refused to allow her to carry her pain alone. Little by little, the fear that had controlled her life began to lose its grip. When she finally became emotionally strong enough to work again, Precious made one important decision. She resigned from the company where she had worked before the wedding because every corner of that place reminded her of Victor and the life she had lost. Instead, she accepted an offer from a much bigger company in Lagos. The same woman people once believed had lost everything gradually built a career bigger than the one she had before. Her experience also changed the direction of her life. Remembering the kindness Mama Obi had shown her and Blessing's loyalty, Precious established a foundation dedicated to helping young women escaping abusive homes. The organization provided temporary shelter, vocational training, counseling, and educational support, becoming the very kind of refuge she herself had once needed. Months after the truth became public, Victor came to Lagos. He apologized sincerely for everything that had happened. He admitted that although the charm had clouded his mind, he should have trusted Precious enough to question the lies he had been told. He accepted full responsibility for his own choices and confessed that losing her would remain the greatest regret of his life. Precious forgave him, but she never returned to him. Some chapters are forgiven, but they are not rewritten. Sandra also apologized. By then, she had lost not only her marriage, but also the future she believed she had stolen. She admitted that jealousy had blinded her and confessed every role she had played alongside her mother. Precious forgave her as well, but the closeness they could have shared as sisters was gone forever. Some relationships survive betrayal, others become lessons that must simply be left behind. 3 years passed. Precious was no longer remembered as the bride who ran mad on her wedding day. She was known as a successful career woman, the founder of a foundation transforming the lives of vulnerable young women, and a woman whose unwavering faith had carried her through unimaginable pain. Blessing remained her closest friend. Mama Obi remained the mother God had given her when she needed one the most. Chief Adewale became one of the foundation's strongest supporters, determined to spend the rest of his life making up for the years he had failed his daughter. Precious had completely stopped looking for love. Instead, she poured all her energy into her career and the foundation she had established. It was during this period that she met David Adebayo, a software engineer based in Lagos who regularly volunteered his time and resources to support charitable organizations. David already knew Precious's story long before they became friends. He never looked at her with pity. Instead, he admired her strength, respected her character, and saw beyond the painful chapter that had once defined her life. Their friendship grew naturally over time. There was no pressure, no secrets, no manipulation. Only honesty, mutual respect, and a quiet peace that Precious had never experienced before. Months later, David asked her to marry him. This time, Precious wanted something completely different. Instead of a lavish ceremony, she chose a small, intimate wedding attended only by close family, trusted friends, Blessing, Mama Obi, and her father, Chief Adewale. On the morning of the wedding, Blessing helped Precious into a beautiful white wedding gown. As she adjusted the veil, she smiled gently and asked, "Are you afraid?" Precious looked at her reflection for a long moment. Then she smiled. No. She gently held the fabric of her dress before adding, "Because this dress was chosen with truth." A few moments later, she walked down the aisle and married David Adebayo. This time, there was no lies, no betrayal, no manipulation, no fear. Only love, only truth, only peace. And as Precious walked hand in hand with her husband into a new chapter of her life, she realized something she had once believed impossible. Sometimes, losing the wrong person is the first step towards finding the right one. Moral of the story: jealousy may steal another person's joy for a moment, but it can never build lasting happiness. Lies eventually collapse under the weight of truth, and while forgiveness sets the heart free, it does not always restore broken relationships. Above all, never underestimate the power of faith, genuine friendship, and God's ability to restore a life that seems completely broken. If this story blessed you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next inspiring story. Share this story with someone who needs the reminder that no matter how painful today may be, God can still write a beautiful ending. Thank you for watching.